Well, good morning to you all. It's about 2 o'clock in the morning Eastern Standard Time. I would have actually done a video earlier. However, the internet was down. Um, it was down, and they were doing maintenance work around this area, so I wasn't able to get online. And now that's been taken care of, I can uh, I can talk about the latest news about Afghanistan. But before I do, I would like to let you know that you can kind of keep up with what I have to say by simply subscribing to this channel and hitting that notification bell, and just to keep up with what I have to say. So I want to talk about President Joe Biden, Senator Lindsey Graham, and Afghanistan. Okay, this week, President Joe Biden announced a plan to withdraw from Afghanistan, and it's something that it's one of those things that shouldn't even be up for debate. This is America's longest war. We've been there for nearly 20 years. It's time to pull out. This is not a Democrat thing. This is not a Republican thing. This is not a Green thing. This is not a Libertarian thing. This is an American thing. This is something that I think that people can unite with. There's no partisanship to this. Um, there's no part. Should not even be any partisanship. We're fatigued of war. We are in deep debt because of the war, and this war is unwinnable. They're not going to take over Nebraska. They're not going to go and take over. They don't have the means to do this. We served our purpose. It's time to leave. And good for President Biden if he can do it to get us out of Afghanistan. I'm not going to hold my breath, but if he can do it, bravo, bravo. Afghanistan. The thing about it is, in 1979, the Soviets, we're under the impression that the Soviets invaded Afghanistan in 1979. That was nonsense. What happened was that Afghanistan was a Soviet-friendly state at that time, and they had trouble with the Mujahideen rebels. Cannot pronounce their name correctly. Basically, a paramilitary right-wing Islamic radical group called Mujahideen, and they were trying to overthrow the communist puppet government of Afghanistan at the time. And the Afghan government then asked for the Soviets, please help us, help us, help us. And while I'm not a communist, I'm going to say it like it is. Some things are worse than communism. And, I would think a radical theocracy like the kind of government that the Taliban is today, that movement is much worse than communism could ever be. And so, yes, I'll tell you where I got the idea and the notion that the Soviets were actually the good guys in Afghanistan in the 1980s. And it was from my dad, who basically is a paleo-conservative, old right Republican, isolationist leaning. And he and I was watching 60 Minutes in 1987, and we saw one of these rebels firing an American-made rocket launcher up into the sky to shoot down a Soviet plane. And the 60 Minute story, basically painted the situation that look, that's a freedom fighter. Isn't he just wonderful? And my dad and I were watching this after dinner, and Sunday night, and we were like, and my dad says to me, son, that man is not a freedom fighter. He's not a hero. That rocket launcher that he used to shoot down that Soviet plane will one day be used against us. And these were his words. Some things are worse than communism. And if these people win, they're going to have the people of Afghanistan going to be suffering under things worse than communism. And my dad is an old line anti-communist saying this. So So I knew from a very early age what could potentially happen, and he turned out to be correct. It wasn't a missile launcher; they were commercial airline jets. Saudi Arabia and the Taliban's got together and they committed what is we all known as 9/11 on September the 11th, 2001, a tragedy for sure. And as a response, we went into Afghanistan. Well, I can understand going after Osama bin Laden for what he did to us. And I'm going to tell you, as a pacifist, as a relative pacifist, all these years, I was even sympathetic to going into Afghanistan initially, just to go after Osama bin Laden, because we were attacked. However, what George W. Bush and Dick Cheney did was the most ass backwards, incorrect method of fighting against terrorism. We ended up invading another country, a country that had nothing, nothing to do with 9/11. Saddam Hussein had nothing to do with 9/11. In fact, while Saddam Hussein was a bad guy, Christians were not mistreated in Iraq. Women were considered on par with the West as far as equality issues were concerned. Um, yes, Saddam Hussein was a bad guy, but Iraq was not a theocracy. It was a secular state. And so, while he was a bad man, he had nothing to do with 9/11. He's, he knew what would happen if he even attempted to try. He was actually gave up the chemical weapons and the weapons of mass destruction, did everything he could. The United States still invaded him anyway because George W. Bush wanted to avenge for the situation that bin Laden, Saddam Hussein was in with his father. And that's what it came down to. I'm not saying that 9/11 was an inside job. That's conspiracy theories 101. I don't wear that kind of tinfoil hat. But, he certainly took a crisis and taken advantage of it. And what did it cost? Tens of trillions of dollars, close to 1 million people dying in the Middle East, thousands of our American troops dying as a result, and the trillions that was squandered away where we can't go and address the problems here at home, such as solving the poverty problem, solving the healthcare problem, solving the infrastructure problem, solving the environmental problems, solving the college tuition crisis. I mean, those trillions of dollars could have been put to use here in the United States, but George W. Bush and Dick Cheney saw how to do something in a stupid ass backwards way, and by golly, that's the way they went. This is why I said that George W. Bush was the worst president this country's ever had. Well, here's the thing. Osama bin Laden was eventually captured, shot, murdered in 2011 in Pakistan. While I was still saying for years, after 2 or 3 years in Afghanistan, I was saying it was time to pull out. Here's the thing. Once you got Osama bin Laden, what's the use to stay in Afghanistan? It costs trillions of American dollars. It's costing lives of our soldiers, and is actually pissing off the radical elements in that region with our presence there. Uh, you couldn't ask for a better way to make life tough for the United States than what George W. Bush did, and what Barack Obama continued, and what Donald Trump can continue, and what looks like maybe Biden might finish and do the right thing. I'm hoping. Please, Mr. President, please give me a reason. Give me a reason to actually be supportive of your presidency. We are disappointed that there's no $15 hour minimum wage. I didn't ever expect a Medicare for all, but I'm disappointed that there's not even any serious attempt for public option or lowering the Medicare eligibility age to 55 or 50. I'm disappointed that done next to nothing about student debt. I'm disappointed that there's no talk right now of the Protect the Right to Organize Act. Things that are going to make a substantial difference to the American people. So please do something relatively bold and progressive that I can say, you know what, Biden might have been a sellout on this and this and that, but he pulled the troops out of Afghanistan. Got to go get credit for it. Get credit for that. I'm glad he did that. And I want to say something positive about his presidency. So we'll see what happens. We will see what happens. Now, let's go back to the previous presidency of Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump had a lot of faults. I didn't vote for him. And there's a lot of things that he did domestically and on foreign policy that I did not agree with. Murdering General Qasem Soleimani in Baghdad last year was one of the worst things. Well, walking out of the Iran peace deal was one of the worst things he did. Bullying Venezuela is another terrible thing he did, and murdering General Soleimani in Baghdad last year was also a terrible thing. And that was actually a war criminal act. Yes, Soleimani is not an angel by any stretch of the imagination. He is not an angel by any stretch of the imagination. But you know what? For those out there that kind of believe the mainstream media and believe the mainstream BS from both political parties and believe in what is called the Washington, D.C. consensus, he may not have been a nice man, but here's something you need to know about Qasem Soleimani and the government of Iran. They have something in common with the United States. They are both critics of Al Qaeda. They're both critics of ISIS. They have a common cause, and and they have different reasons, perhaps, for not liking ISIS and for not liking Al Qaeda. But the United States and Iran has the same political enemies, and so if you want to talk about lesser evilism, I don't like the government of Iran. I don't like what they do in their persecution of leftists. I don't like their official government line on homophobia, giving people from the LGBTQ community an option to be executed or endure gender reassignment surgery against their will. That's not a good thing. So I got plenty of criticism of Iran, but you know what? The United States is very buddy with a country that do similar shit called Saudi Arabia, and that country sponsors more terrorism against the West than Iran does. For every act of terrorism Iran commit against the West, Saudi Arabia will beat it by 20-1. So, and the thing about Donald Trump is that he was not necessarily George W. Bush and Dick Cheney in that regard. Some Republicans in the primaries of 2016, going on into the election, were not too trusting of Trump on his foreign policy. And his foreign policy might have been, his he did have a tendency to side overall compared to other Republican presidents on non-interventionism, in spite of his bullying of Venezuela and his murder of Soleimani in Baghdad and the bombings he did in Syria. And the thing about it is, when he went neocon, I sort of do believe that the the neocons and the establishment that was in his administration, whether it was the John Boltons or the Mike Pompeos, you name it. They basically um, had his hands shoved down and tied to make sure he couldn't do what would have been the stop clock given the right time twice a day. Um, People shit on Jimmy Dore for being on Tucker Carlson, and I can understand why people don't like Tucker Carlson, and I certainly don't. But here's the thing: um, Tucker Carlson is not wrong on foreign policy. He doesn't believe in this war nonsense. And Jimmy Dore and Tucker Carlson got together to make sure that Donald Trump kind of overheard Jimmy Dore's plea to pull out of Afghanistan prior to the end of his presidency. And I have to say, that was actually a good thing they did. Unfortunately, didn't happen because Donald Trump was basically, well, in the words of Tulsi Gabbard, Saudi Arabia's bitch. All her faults. She's not wrong when it comes to foreign policy. But anyway, the neocons were in the way. Well, Joe Biden, as I said, has announced that he's going to pull out of Afghanistan. And if he can do this, I'm going to say to Joe Biden, thank you, sir. You did something positive. Um, this will be a wonderful thing you can do. Enter Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina. And I know I spent all this time talking about Joe Biden and talking about Donald Trump and George W. Bush. But let's talk about Lindsey Graham for a moment. Lindsey Graham, he is a neocon that is always wrong when it comes to foreign policy. He is predicting another 9/11. He's predicting another 9/11 if we pull out of Iraq. So I want to play you this bull crap segment of what he had to say. Let's go. Hold on.
The result of this decision today by President Biden is to cancel an insurance policy that, in my view, would prevent another 9/11, because I believe with all my heart and soul, after 50-something trips to the region, that a few thousand Americans watching over there would make it hard for Al-Qaeda and ISIS to reorganize to hit us over here. Those eyes and ears will be gone. I don't trust the Taliban to look out for American interest, but we're finding ourselves in a very precarious situation. Again, there are no great outcomes, but this is the worst possible outcome, is to pull up and leave and hope that things will turn out well. That did not happen in Iraq, and it did not happen here. The least risky choice is to keep American military personnel with the intelligence community involved in Afghanistan until there's a genuine reconciliation, until the Taliban and the Afghan people can find a way to move forward together. It is not democracy I'm pushing under this concept. It is making sure that the country doesn't become the safe haven it was 20 years ago.
Okay. That's Lindsey Graham, one of the biggest proponents of a neoconservative Bush-Cheney era foreign policy. The man is wrong. Just for every breath of air he takes, he's wrong about everything. And the thing about it is, he's a war criminal. He was a big proponent of the Iraq War. He was a big proponent of everything that was ass backwards about the Bush-Cheney foreign policy. And I'm not being partisan saying this. I am not being partisan. Hillary Clinton voted for the Iraq War. She's a war criminal. John Kerry voted for the Iraq War. He's a war criminal. John Edwards voted for the Iraq War. He's a war criminal. Joe Biden voted for the Iraq War. He's a war criminal. John McCain voted for the Iraq War. He's a war criminal. I mean, just keep going on and on and on. And, you know, Lindsey Graham, he's also a war criminal. Got blood on his hands. As I said, and he's got blood on his hands, and he's going to sit there and and try to convince us to keep doing what hasn't worked. Get the fuck out of here. I mean, the thing about it is, the Taliban are now just as much in charge as they were in 2001. Trillions of dollars squandered away in a wasted effort. All a big waste of time. And the dirty little secret is, actually the good thing about the occupation of Iraq and Afghanistan, if one must find a good thing about it, is that we went and did the nation building. And when we did something that we can't, for some reason, do in the United States, is to have a single payer system in Iraq and a single payer system in Afghanistan. And then these politicians from both parties said, how are we going to pay for Medicare for all in the United States? Make it possible in Iraq and Afghanistan. But you know what? I'm all for people in Afghanistan and Iraq having single payer health care. But I'd much rather for Americans to have single payer health care in the United States. The billions that we give to Israel each year, you know what? They have a single payer system too in Israel. Actually, they have socialized medicine, full blown socialized medicine in Israel, similar to the National Health Service in the UK. Even an apartheid state like Israel can do something good, like provide medical care for all their citizens. And what the hell's wrong with the United States that we can't do that here? And we can't afford it. We can afford it in other countries, but we can't go and have health care here in the United States. What the hell is wrong with that picture? But, Lindsey Graham is a sad man. He is a wrong man. He's a wrong person. He's wrong about everything. And he's an SOB for actually trying to urge the United States to do what they have failed in doing all these years. If we withdraw from Afghanistan and they try to cause any trouble again, sure, the United States will probably go back in there and take care of them. But here's the thing. And I say this as a pacifist. Yeah, if you're going to do it in the name of self-defense, that's one thing. But doing it to occupy and doing it to occupy just to satisfy the bloodlust of secular neocons and political evangelicals in the United States. No, Americans are fatigued of these neocon wars. You don't have to be a liberal snowflake lefty or whatever you want to call it. We're talking about liberal Democrats. We're talking about libertarians. We're talking about paleo conservatives within the Republican Party. We're talking about the Greens. We're talking about it's across the spectrum. It's a nonpartisan thing. It's time to leave. Get out. If you like what you heard, press like and comment. If you didn't, comment anyway. Feel free to share the content on this channel. As a First Amendment absolutist, it's my duty to inform you that if you have a platform, please utilize it, because we're the muckrakers of our time. In addition, as I said before, please subscribe to this channel, hit that notification bell, and until next time, I am American Social Democracy. Peace. Class struggle yesterday, class struggle today, class struggle tomorrow, until we have full economic and social justice for all.